She was just a small figure in the middle of a busy street, a girl whose shoes were too old, and whose dress carried the weight of many years. Every afternoon, after finishing her little errands for her mother, she walked to the same place. It was the Grand Hotel at the center of the city, a shining building with glass doors and golden lights. The hotel was a world far away from her own. Inside it, rich people laughed, spoke loudly, and moved with a kind of confidence she had never felt. But she did not come to see them. She came for the sound. From the lobby, through the open doors, she could hear the piano. Sometimes it was played by a guest, other times by the hotel's own musician. To her, the music was magic. It was the only thing that could carry her away from her small, broken home, where pots were often empty and her mother's hands were always tired. When she closed her eyes and listened, the notes painted pictures in her mind. Dreams of soft dresses, shiny stages, and a piano just for her. But the truth was harsh. Her family had nothing extra, not even for books, let alone a piano lesson. Her father had passed away years ago, and her mother worked as a cleaner in small shops, scraping enough money just to keep them alive. The girl knew this, and so she never asked for more. Still, every day she returned, her heart pressed against the hotel's golden world, hungry for just one more song. People noticed her sometimes. The rich men and women dressed in silk and suits looked at her with quick glances. Some frowned. Others smiled weakly before walking past. To them, she was just a poor child standing too close to where she did not belong. But she did not care. As long as she could stand at the edge of the lobby and hear the piano, her heart was satisfied. There were days when the musician did not come. The lobby was filled only with voices and the sound of glasses clinking. Those were the hardest days. The girl would wait and wait, hoping someone would sit at the grand black piano. But often no one did. On those evenings she would walk home with her head low, carrying silence instead of music. Silence was heavy for her. It reminded her of her small room, the peeling walls, and her mother's quiet sighs as she counted coins by candlelight. Still, she never gave up. She told herself that music was not only for the rich, it was for anyone who had a heart. She believed that strongly. Even though she had never touched a piano, she imagined that if her fingers ever touched the keys, music would flow naturally, like it was waiting inside her all along. She dreamed of the day when someone, anyone, would give her a chance. There was something in her eyes that people sometimes noticed, even though she wore torn clothes and her hair was never neat. Her eyes had a fire. It was the kind of fire that comes from hope, fragile but burning. That fire kept her standing in front of that hotel when the rest of the city moved on. Children from nearby streets sometimes teased her. They called her foolish for wasting time listening to songs she could never play, but she ignored them. They did not understand what it meant to hold a dream, no matter how impossible it seemed. Her mother, too, though worried about her, never stopped her from going. Maybe the mother secretly understood that music was the only light in her daughter's life. Every note of the piano meant more to her than words could explain. It was not just sound, it was a promise. A promise that life could be more than hunger and broken shoes. A promise that dreams were allowed. Sometimes she whispered to herself while listening, one day it will be my turn." And so the poor girl kept her routine. Each day she stood at the edge of wealth, a quiet shadow no one truly noticed. Yet inside her small chest lived a world of music, longing to be free. She did not know that soon her life would take a turn. That one day her courage would push her beyond listening into asking, and that question, so simple yet so brave, would change everything. The hotel lobby was brighter than usual that evening. Tall chandeliers sparkled like diamonds in the ceiling, and the red carpet looked as if it had been brushed for royalty. Guests in fine suits and elegant dresses moved around with laughter and chatter. Suddenly, the heavy glass doors opened, and the air changed. People turned their heads, whispering to each other. The young millionaire had arrived. He was not much older than 30, but everyone in the city already knew his name. Newspapers wrote about his fast rise in business. His face appeared on magazine covers, and he was invited to every important event. Some admired him, others envied him. Many called him cold and untouchable. a man who cared only about numbers and deals. He walked with quiet confidence. His shoes shined against the marble floor, and his tailored suit seemed cut from cloth no ordinary man could afford. Two men followed him closely, assistants carrying his phone and documents. Behind them, a small group of friends laughed too loudly, trying to appear close to him. But he did not smile. His face was calm, almost serious, as if he was always lost in thought. The poor girl standing near the corner noticed him right away. She had seen famous people before in the hotel, but this man was different. Everyone stepped aside as he walked. Staff hurried to greet him, bowing slightly. Even the rich guests lowered their voices, giving him space. The girl watched silently, curious. For some reason, she felt there was more to him than what others whispered. As he moved through the lobby, his eyes wandered around. He looked at the golden lights, the polished piano, and the grand staircase. He had seen all these things many times before, yet tonight his gaze lingered on the piano a little longer. Perhaps it reminded him of something from far back in his life, something he rarely shared. No one could guess, because he never spoke of it. People whispered as he passed, "That's the young millionaire, the one who bought 3 companies last year. They say he never wastes time on useless things. Look at him, so serious, like money is the only thing that matters." Their words floated in the air, shaping his image. He did not respond. He had learned to ignore both praise and gossip. For him, they were just sounds. The girl studied his face carefully. There was a sharpness in his eyes, but also a weight, as if he carried stories locked away. She felt nervous just watching him because this was a man who seemed far above her world, and yet, something about the way he looked at the piano made her heart race. When he stopped near the instrument, the lobby grew quieter. His friends followed but seemed impatient. One of them laughed and said, "Come on, let's not waste time here. No one wants to see you touch that old thing." The others joined in with chuckles. They thought it was funny, the idea of a millionaire sitting down to play. The staff too waited. They wondered if he would do something unusual, but most believed he wouldn't. After all, he was known for his business mind, not for art or music. His life was filled with meetings, investments, and luxury. Why would he care about a piano in a hotel lobby? The girl, however, hoped differently. She had listened to that piano for months, but always from strangers. What if tonight was different? What if this powerful man could bring something unexpected? She clutched her hands together tightly, as if wishing her hope into reality. The millionaire's hand touched the polished wood of the piano for just a second. His fingers slid lightly across the edge. Then he pulled back, as if uncertain. His friends laughed again. "Leave it. You don't have time for toys," one said. But the girl saw a flicker in his eyes, a hesitation that did not match the cold man everyone described. In that moment, the lobby felt like a stage waiting for something to happen. The poor girl's heart pounded. The guests leaned forward with curiosity, and the young millionaire stood there, caught between his public image and a quiet memory that stirred inside him. He was a man who could buy almost anything in the world. Yet as he stood before the piano, he looked like someone facing a choice that money could not decide. The choice was simple: walk away like everyone expected, or sit down and let the world see a part of him no one knew existed. The young millionaire stood near the piano, and the whole lobby seemed to hold its breath. His friends were laughing softly, making small jokes, but he paid them no attention. The poor girl, who had been standing quietly near the corner, felt her heart beating faster. She had watched the piano for months, and now the richest man in the room was standing right beside it. For a long moment she struggled with herself. Should she stay silent like always, or should she take the risk and speak? Her fingers shook as she held onto the edge of her worn dress. Her lips were dry and fear filled her chest. What if he became angry? What if the staff pushed her away? What if the whole lobby laughed at her? These thoughts almost stopped her, but then she remembered why she came every evening. She did not come for food or gifts. She came for the music. And now the chance was standing before her. Slowly, with small steps, she walked closer. Guests noticed her movement and turned their heads. Some frowned, thinking she did not belong there. Others raised their eyebrows with curiosity. The staff looked nervous, worried that the girl would disturb the important man. But she kept walking. Her little heart was strong, stronger than her fear. When she reached the millionaire, she lifted her chin. Her voice was trembling but clear enough to be heard. "Sir, could you please play something on the piano?" The kai. Words slipped into the silence like a stone dropped into still water, and immediately the ripples spread. When she reached the millionaire, she lifted her chin. Her voice was trembling but clear enough to be heard. "Sir, could you please play something on the piano?" The words slipped into the silence like a stone dropped into still water, and immediately the ripples spread. The lobby froze, glasses stopped clinking. Conversations ended mid-sentence, even the staff stood stiff like statues. The millionaire's friends burst into laughter. Loud and mocking. "Did you hear that?" one of them said. "She wants him to play, that's the funniest thing I've heard all week." Another added. "Does she think this is some kind of street show?" But the girl did not move. Her eyes stayed on the millionaire, she was afraid. But inside her was a burning hope. She was not asking for money, not for food, not for anything but music, and that courage gave her strength. The millionaire looked at her. His sharp eyes softened just a little. He was surprised, because in his world people only asked him for deals, favors, or opportunities to get rich. No one ever asked him for something so simple, so human. For a long time he said nothing, and the silence grew heavier. Whispers started around the lobby. "Who is this girl? She has no manners and he will never answer her." Some shook their heads, feeling pity. Others watched with cruel excitement, waiting for her to be embarrassed. The girl could hear some of the whispers, but she stood still. She had already dared too much to run away now. The young millionaire finally leaned a little closer. His friends were still laughing behind him, urging him to ignore her. But his face showed something different, something even his friends had never seen. The girl's request touched something deep inside him, a memory he had buried long ago. He did not speak yet, but the look in his eyes was enough to quiet a few of the whispers. It was as if the world had slowed down. The piano sat quietly beside him, shining under the lobby lights, waiting for a decision. The girl's small voice, though trembling, had shaken the air of the entire room. For the poor girl, those few seconds felt like hours. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. She wondered if she had made a mistake. Maybe she should not have spoken. Maybe she had only placed herself in a moment of shame. But even with fear rising inside her, she did not look away. She kept her eyes on him. As if begging with her heart for him to understand, the millionaire's friends leaned in, whispering, "Don't waste your time, let's go upstairs. You don't owe her anything." But he did not move. He kept his gaze fixed on the girl, his face unreadable. His silence was more powerful than words, and so the moment stretched. The lobby filled with the weight of expectation. The girl, poor and trembling, had asked a question no one else would dare. The millionaire, powerful and silent, stood between two choices: to dismiss her and keep his cold image, or to break it with an act no one expected. The lobby was filled with silence. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, as if the air itself was waiting. The poor girl's request still hung in the air. "Sir, could you please play something on the piano?" Those words had shocked everyone, and now all eyes were fixed on the young millionaire. He did not answer at once, he simply looked at the girl. His dark eyes searched her face as if he was trying to understand her courage. Around him, his friends laughed and whispered. "She is crazy," one said. "You don't need to waste your time," another added. But the millionaire remained silent. His face showed no anger, no smile, only thought. The girl's small body trembled. She felt the weight of 100 eyes watching her. Some eyes were full of pity, others full of annoyance. She wanted to step back, to run away from this moment, but her feet would not move. Something inside her whispered, "Stay." She had already spoken, and now she had to face whatever would come. The guests in the lobby leaned forward in their chairs, waiting. Some of them smirked, expecting the millionaire to dismiss the girl in a cold voice. That was what rich people usually did when the poor dared to cross into their world. Others felt sorry for the child, knowing her heart would break when he rejected her. The silence stretched longer and longer, and the tension grew heavier with every passing second. The millionaire lifted his hand slightly, and his friend stopped laughing for a moment. He ran his fingers slowly across the smooth surface of the piano. The sound of his rings brushing against the polished wood was the only noise in the room. It was such a small gesture, but it made everyone lean closer. Was he really thinking of playing, or was he only teasing the poor girl before walking away? His assistants stood stiff behind him. They were used to him making quick decisions in business, never wasting time, but this was different. This was not about money. This was about a girl's simple request. They too waited, uncertain what their boss would do. The girl swallowed hard, her eyes filled with hope and fear at the same time. She whispered in her heart, "Please, just one song." If he refused, she would never forget this moment. It would haunt her forever. But if he agreed, even for one short melody, it would be the greatest gift of her life. The seconds turned into what felt like minutes. A cough echoed from somewhere in the lobby. A glass clinked against a table, and still the millionaire said nothing. The pause was so long that even the chandeliers seemed to shine more quietly. The whole hotel had fallen into the rhythm of his silence. His friends grew impatient. "Come on, let's go," one urged. "Don't let this silly girl waste our evening." Their laughter tried to break the tension, but it did not. The silence remained stronger than their voices. The millionaire's face was calm, but deep inside a storm was moving. The girl's request had awakened a memory he had locked away for years, a memory of himself as a child, sitting in a small room with a broken keyboard, his mother's tired hands guiding his fingers over the keys. He remembered how music had once been his only escape from hunger and loneliness, just like it was for this girl now. But no one else knew this secret to the world. He was only the cold young businessman who cared about wealth and power. That was why the pause felt endless, because in that moment he was deciding whether to show the world a side of himself he had hidden for so long. The girl held her breath. She could feel her heart pounding in her ears. The longer he stayed silent, the more painful it became. Was he angry? Was he offended? Did he think she was foolish? She almost opened her mouth to apologize, but then stopped. Something in his eyes told her to wait. And so she waited, and everyone else waited too. The pause stretched like an invisible thread, tighter and tighter, ready to break. No one could predict what he would do. The poor girl had dared to ask, but the answer still balanced on the edge of his silence. In that pause, time seemed to lose meaning. The grand piano sat between them like a secret door. Waiting to be opened, the crowd held its breath. The girl held her hope, and the millionaire held his decision. What he did next would either crush a dream or light a spark that no one would ever forget. The silence was finally broken when the young millionaire pulled out the piano bench and sat down. The sound of the wooden bench sliding against the marble floor echoed across the lobby. People gasped quietly. They could not believe what they were seeing. This was not a man known for playing music. This was a man known for money and power, yet here he was, sitting in front of the grand piano because of a poor girl's request. The girl's heart leapt. She could not take her eyes off him. Her small hands pressed tightly together as if she was praying. His friends stared in shock, their laughter cut short. Some of them exchanged nervous glances, unsure if he was serious or just making a joke. The staff stood frozen, not daring to move or even breathe loudly. The millionaire placed his hands on the keys. His fingers were long and strong, polished with diamond rings. But when they touched the piano, something changed. The cold, sharp image that people always spoke of seemed to melt. He pressed a single key and the sound rang out clear and bright. That one note was enough to fill the room with electricity. Everyone leaned forward, waiting for what would follow. Then his other hand joined. The first chords flowed into the air like water breaking through a dam. The music began soft, almost shy, but quickly it grew stronger. His fingers moved with confidence. Dancing across the keys, each note blended with the next, creating a melody that wrapped around every person in the room. The girl's eyes widened with wonder. She had listened to many people play that piano before, but this was different. This was not just music, this was a story. Every note seemed to speak, to cry, to laugh. It was as if the piano had been waiting all this time for him. The sound filled the entire lobby, climbing up the golden walls and echoing under the chandeliers. The guests who had been ready to laugh now sat in silence. Some forgot to sip their drinks. Others set aside their conversations. Their eyes were fixed on the man at the piano. They had expected a cold businessman, but what they heard was the heart of an artist. The poor girl could feel tears rising in her eyes. This was beyond her imagination. She had only hoped for a simple melody, maybe just a few notes. But what she received was a performance that touched her soul. She pressed her hand to her chest, afraid her heart might burst from the beauty of the music. The millionaire closed his eyes as he played. His mind drifted away from the grand lobby, away from the stairs, back to the small broken keyboard of his childhood. He remembered the dim room, his mother's gentle voice, and the nights when music was the only light in their lives. The pain of those days mixed with the joy of survival, and all of it poured into his music. His friends, who had once mocked the idea, now stood in silence. Some looked uncomfortable, others ashamed. They had never seen this side of him. They had known his wealth, his power, his success, but they had never seen his heart. The melody rose higher and higher, filling the air with emotions that words could never carry. It was strong yet tender, powerful yet delicate. The chandeliers sparkled as if they too were moved by the sound. Even the staff, trained to stay professional, could not stop themselves from listening with awe. The girl could no longer hold back her tears. They streamed down her cheeks as she watched. She felt as though the music was written just for her, for every poor child who dreamed of something more, for every hungry night that still carried hope. She whispered softly, "Thank you." Though her voice was drowned by the sound of the piano, the millionaire did not stop. His fingers moved faster, the music flowing like fire and rain. The lobby had become a different world, a place where rich and poor, laughter and sorrow, power and weakness all blended into one melody. Finally, after what felt like a timeless moment, the last note hung in the air, long and trembling. It echoed against the marble, against the glass doors, and slowly faded into silence. For a second, no one moved. No one even breathed. The room was frozen in the magic of what they had just heard. Then, almost as if waking from a dream, the crowd reacted. Some gasped, others whispered. A few even clapped softly before stopping, unsure if applause would break the spell. But the girl, her eyes shining with tears, began to clap with all her strength. Her small hands made sharp sounds in the silent room, and slowly others followed. The lobby filled with applause, rising like a storm. The millionaire lifted his hands from the piano and looked at the girl. In her face he saw the same hunger he once had. The hunger for music, the hunger for dreams, and in that moment, he knew he had done something greater than any business deal. He had given life to hope. The last note faded, and the applause slowly died down. The young millionaire kept his hands on the piano for a few moments, breathing deeply. His eyes were half closed. And for the first time in years, he felt something real. Not the rush of winning a deal or the pride of buying another company, but the quiet heartbeat of his past. He lifted his head and looked around the lobby. Everyone's faces were filled with surprise. Even respect. His friends stood silently, their laughter gone. The poor girl, standing with her eyes full of tears, looked at him as if he was more than a rich man, as if he was a miracle. He gave her a small nod, then finally spoke. His voice was calm but heavy with memory. "You asked me to play," he said slowly, "but maybe you don't know that once, long ago, music was all I had." The guests leaned closer, shocked that the man who rarely spoke of his personal life was now opening his heart. The girl tilted her head, listening carefully. He continued, "I was not born into this world of hotels and suits. I grew up in a place much smaller than you can imagine. My family was poor, poorer than anyone here could believe. We had no fancy clothes, no shining floors, only cracked walls and an old roof that leaked when it rained." His words surprised the crowd, because they had always imagined he was born into wealth. He placed his fingers gently on the piano again, pressing a soft key as if each sound carried a memory. "My mother worked day and night. Her hands were always rough, her back always tired. But she believed in something more. She believed in music. She found an old keyboard at a junk shop, half broken, missing keys. But to her it was treasure." The girl's eyes widened. She could picture it clearly. A poor boy sitting on a broken keyboard, just like her dreams of touching a piano one day. She felt a strange connection to him, stronger than words. The millionaire's voice softened. "At night, when the world was quiet, my mother sat beside me. She taught me to play simple songs, not with money or lessons, but with love and patience. That music gave me hope. It told me that even though the world outside was cruel, there was still beauty to be found." His friends shifted uncomfortably. They had known him for years, but none of them had ever heard this story. To them, he had always been strong, always untouchable. They never guessed that his strength was born from struggle. He looked at the girl again. "I see myself in you," he said. "I see the same hunger in your eyes, the same fire I once had. People may laugh. They may tell you dreams are useless, but dreams can carry you further than you know. The lobby was completely silent now. Every person was caught in his words. Even the staff who usually avoided staring at guests now stood openly, their faces soft with respect. The chandeliers sparkled above as if they too were listening. The poor girl felt her tears fall again. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but her throat was tight. All she could do was hold her hands to her chest and nod. His story was her story too. Different lives, but the same pain of poverty. The same longing for something beautiful. The millionaire leaned back slightly, his eyes far away. When I built my empire, when I earned all this wealth, I locked away that boy with the broken keyboard. I thought I didn't need him anymore. But tonight, because of you, I remembered. And I realize now that I still need him. We all need the child we once were, the child who believed in dreams. A guest in the corner whispered, "I never knew." Another said softly, "Who would have thought?" The lobby was filled with murmurs of surprise and admiration. The image of the cold, heartless millionaire was melting, replaced by a man who carried scars. Just like everyone else, the girl wiped her eyes quickly, afraid he would see her crying. But when she looked up, his eyes were already on her, kind and gentle. He gave a small smile, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him in a long time. In that smile was a promise that her courage to ask had been worth it. The moment felt like magic. A secret had been revealed, a hidden past brought into the light, and in that truth, both the millionaire and the girl found something they had been missing: connection. The piano sat quietly now, its keys still warm from his touch. The guests sat in silence, holding on to every word. They had expected only wealth and pride from this man, but instead they received honesty and music, something far more valuable. The girl knew deep in her heart that she would never forget this night, not just because of the music, but because she had seen that even the richest man in the room had once been like her, hungry, poor, and dreaming. The young millionaire stood up slowly from the piano bench. The echo of his story still floated in the air. The lobby was quiet again, but this time it was not a cold silence. It was warm, heavy with respect and wonder. Everyone was waiting to see what he would do next. The poor girl wiped her face with her sleeve. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but they were shining with hope. She had not expected all of this when she first walked into the lobby. She had only wanted one song, yet now she had been given his music and his story. For her, that was already a treasure. She thought it was the end, but the night had more surprises waiting. The millionaire looked at her and then turned to the crowd. His voice was calm but carried through the whole room. "Dreams matter more than wealth," he said. "Without dreams, even the richest life is empty." The guests shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their heads. His words were not just for the girl, they were for everyone. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. He handed it to the hotel manager. "Arrange for her to have piano lessons here," he said firmly. "I will cover everything." The words struck the lobby like thunder. People gasped, his friends stared in shock. The girl herself could not believe what she had just heard. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked around, wondering if she had heard wrong. Could it be true? Was he really giving her something she had only dreamed of in secret? Piano lessons in the same hotel where she had spent so many evenings just listening from the corner. It was impossible, yet it was happening. The manager nodded quickly, still stunned. "Of course, sir. It will be arranged immediately." Staff members exchanged wide-eyed glances. They knew how expensive such lessons were. It was not something an ordinary family could ever afford, let alone a poor girl. The millionaire turned back to her, his eyes soft but steady. "Never stop believing," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried weight. It sounded less like advice and more like a command from someone who had lived through the same struggle. The girl's knees felt weak. She wanted to run forward to thank him, but her feet would not move instead. Tears rolled down her face again, not of sadness this time, but of joy. She pressed her small hands against her chest and nodded quickly. Her heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst. The crowd began to whisper again, but the tone was different now. There was no laughter, no mockery, only admiration. "I never thought he had such kindness," one said. "He's not what the papers write," another murmured. Slowly, the image of the cold, heartless millionaire was disappearing, replaced by the vision of a man who had not forgotten where he came from. His friends, who had laughed earlier, now stood awkwardly. Some of them even looked ashamed. They had mocked the girl, they had doubted him, but now they could see he was bigger than just his wealth. He had touched everyone with his music and his gift. The girl's tears sparkled under the golden lights of the lobby. She whispered softly, almost too soft to hear, "Thank you." Her voice trembled, but those two words carried all the gratitude in her heart. She knew this night would change her life forever. The millionaire gave her one last smile before turning to leave. His steps were calm, but every person who watched him knew they had seen something extraordinary. He had not only played the piano, he had given a piece of his soul, and then, beyond that, he had given a gift that could turn a dream into reality. The piano sat silently once more, but it no longer looked the same to the girl. It was no longer just an unreachable instrument. It was now a doorway, a promise of lessons to come. Every key seemed to whisper her future. Waiting for her hands, the guests slowly began to clap again. Not just for the music this time, but for the act itself. It was not a performance they would forget. It was a lesson, a reminder that true greatness does not come only from wealth, but from kindness. The girl stayed standing in the same place, her heart still trembling. She thought of her mother waiting at home, tired and worried. How would she tell her this? How would she explain that one brave question had opened a door to her dreams? She could already imagine her mother's tears of joy. And as the people left the lobby one by one, they carried with them not only the story of a millionaire playing the piano, but also the story of a poor girl whose courage had touched his heart. A story that would be told again and again. A story that would inspire others to believe in the impossible. That night, for the first time in her life, the poor girl walked home with music still playing in her ears. Not just from memory, but from the promise of her future. She did not walk as a shadow anymore. She walked like someone who had been seen, someone whose dream had been given wings. The night outside was calm when the poor girl finally left the hotel. The city lights sparkled around her, but none of them felt as bright as the light burning inside her heart. She walked slowly, her old shoes tapping against the street. Yet she felt as though she was floating. Behind her, the grand piano still stood in the hotel lobby. But it no longer seemed like a distant dream. It had become part of her life now. Her mind replayed every moment. The way the millionaire had walked in, the silence of the crowd, the first note that changed everything, and finally his words, "Never stop believing." They echoed in her chest like music, stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. When she reached her small home, her mother was waiting by the door. Her tired eyes widened as she saw the girl's glowing face. "What happened?" she asked softly. The girl rushed forward, hugging her tightly. Her words poured out like a river. She told her mother about the piano, about the millionaire, about the gift that seemed too big to be real. Her mother's hands shook as she held her, tears rolling down her cheeks. For years she had worried that life would crush her daughter's dreams, but now it seemed those dreams had found wings. The next days moved like a miracle, true to his word. The millionaire had arranged everything. The hotel staff welcomed the girl not as a shadow outside the lobby, but as a student. She was given lessons on the very piano she had once only admired from afar. Each time she touched the keys, her heart filled with gratitude. Every note she played was a reminder of that one night of courage. News of the event spread quickly through the city. People told the story of the poor girl who had dared to ask a young millionaire to play, and how his unexpected response had shocked everyone. Newspapers wrote about it, guests repeated it to their friends, and soon it became more than just a small moment. It became a story of hope. Children in poor neighborhoods whispered her name with excitement. "If she can ask, maybe we can too," they said. Parents told their children the story when they were afraid to dream. Teachers repeated it to remind their students that courage matters. The girl herself never asked for fame, but her story became a light for many others. The millionaire, too, found himself changed. For years he had built walls around his heart, hiding his past, pretending it no longer mattered. But after that night, something softened inside him. He began to look at the world differently. He visited schools, he donated instruments, and he encouraged young children to believe in music and in themselves. People still called him rich, but now they also called him generous. The girl's lessons continued. At first, her hands were clumsy, her fingers stiff, but she never gave up. She practiced for hours, each key becoming a step closer to her dream. Her teacher often marveled at her passion, saying, "It's not just talent, it's heart." She smiled each time, because she knew her heart was what had brought her here. Months passed, then years. The girl grew taller. Her clothes no longer as worn. Her music grew too, filling not just the hotel lobby but sometimes even stages where people clapped and cheered for her. Yet she never forgot the night it all began. The night when a simple request had opened a door to her future. Every time she played, she remembered the millionaire's face. His story, his gift, and his words, she carried them like a song inside her. A song that would never fade for her. Music was no longer just sound, it was life. It was proof that dreams could rise even from the poorest streets. People who had been there that night often told the story again, their voices filled with wonder. "Do you remember how quiet it was before he touched the keys?" they would say, and how everything changed after. The story became like a legend, passed from one person to another. The legacy of that night grew bigger than the piano, bigger than the hotel. It became a symbol of courage and kindness. The girl, now no longer poor in spirit, played not just for herself but for others. She played for children who had no hope, for mothers who worked too hard, for anyone who needed to believe again. Each performance was a gift, just like the gift she had once received. And somewhere in the city, the young millionaire continued his life, but with a lighter heart. He had built many things with his money, but none of them had given him the same peace as that one night. He had given a gift beyond imagination, but he had also received something back. The reminder that wealth is not only measured in gold, but in the lives we touch. The legacy of that song was not only in the notes that echoed through the piano. It was in the courage of a little girl who dared to ask, in the kindness of a man who dared to answer, and in the countless hearts that were moved by the story. It lived on in whispers, in music, in dreams, and so, the girl who once stood in the shadows of a hotel lobby walked into the future with music in her hands, carrying a story that would never be forgotten. A true story that proved sometimes a single question, asked with courage, can change everything.